Listen carefully. This is not another motivational audiobook whispering empty promises. This is a wake-up call. If you have ever felt that you were meant for more, but trapped in a small life, this message is for you. Right now, millions of people live on autopilot, repeating the same days, same fears, same excuses. Then a few decide to do the impossible. They break patterns. They think differently. They act before permission. They build impact that echoes far beyond their lifetime. This book is not about success as society defines it. It is about becoming extraordinary by design, about mastering your mind, sharpening your courage, and choosing purpose over comfort. If you stay until the end, you will not just understand what makes rare individuals different. You will see how to apply it step by step to your own life. And here is the real question before we begin. Are you ready to stop living a normal life and start building a meaningful one? Chapter 1. The decision to do the impossible. Most people never fail at greatness because they never truly decide to pursue it. They live in the safe middle ground, where excuses feel logical and average feels comfortable. The journey toward doing the impossible always begins with a silent, internal decision that no one applauds and no one sees. It is the moment you stop negotiating with your potential and start treating your life like a serious project. Extraordinary people are not born with superhuman traits. They are born with the same fears, doubts, and limitations as everyone else. The difference is that one day, they choose to stop obeying those limits. This decision is not emotional hype or temporary motivation. It is a calm, ruthless choice to live differently, even when the world rewards conformity. The impossible is not something you chase outside yourself. It is something you allow by removing the mental walls you accepted without questioning. Most limits were installed early by family, culture, school, or society, and repeated until they sounded like facts. You were told what is realistic, what is safe, and what kind of life fits someone like you. Over time, these ideas turned into invisible rules. Doing the impossible begins when you challenge those rules and ask a dangerous question: what if they are wrong? This question alone rewires your identity because it shifts you from passive acceptance to active authorship of your life. The decision to be extraordinary often comes after frustration, pain, or a quiet sense of regret. You realize that comfort has a hidden cost and that playing small is more exhausting than risking failure. At this stage, you stop waiting for permission. You understand that clarity comes after action, not before it. Extraordinary people do not wait until they feel ready, confident, or supported. They move while still afraid because they know fear is not a signal to stop, but proof that growth is happening. The decision also requires brutal honesty. You must admit where you are responsible for your stagnation. Blaming circumstances feels good, but it steals your power. When you accept responsibility, you regain control. This is where transformation accelerates. You stop seeing obstacles as personal attacks and start seeing them as training. Every challenge becomes feedback. Every setback becomes data. This mindset separates dreamers from builders. Dreamers consume inspiration and wait for conditions to change. Builders decide first and adapt along the way. Another critical shift happens when you redefine what impossible means. For most people, impossible means uncomfortable, uncertain, or unfamiliar. But history shows that impossible is simply unattempted long enough. Every major breakthrough once lived in the category of ridiculous. The people who achieved them were not reckless. They were committed. Commitment creates stamina. It allows you to stay in the game longer than others are willing to. That alone gives you an unfair advantage. The decision to do the impossible also forces you to raise your standards. You stop tolerating habits, environments, and relationships that drain your focus. You become selective with your time and ruthless with distractions. This is not arrogance. It is respect for your potential. When your standards rise, your behavior follows. You begin to act in alignment with the person you are becoming, not the person you were. Identity leads behavior, not the other way around. This is why affirmations alone fail. Action is the real affirmation. Every small disciplined action sends a message to your brain that you are serious. Momentum builds quietly. Confidence grows from evidence, not words. Over time, you notice a shift. You no longer ask, "Can I do this?" You ask, "How do I do this?" The question changes everything. How questions activate problem solving. Can questions invite doubt? Extraordinary lives are built by people who ask better questions consistently. This chapter ends with a truth most people avoid. Doing the impossible will cost you the approval of people who prefer you predictable. Some will misunderstand your ambition. Others will project their fears onto your goals. This is part of the price. But the cost of ignoring your potential is far higher. Regret compounds quietly. The decision you make today echoes for years. You either choose the discomfort of growth or the comfort of stagnation. One leads to meaning, impact, and self-respect. The other leads to excuses and what-ifs. The moment you decide to do the impossible, you step into a new identity. Not because you succeeded yet, but because you committed. And commitment changes everything. Chapter 2. Identity before achievement. Most people try to change their lives by changing what they do while keeping who they are the same. This is why progress feels temporary and discipline feels heavy. Real transformation begins with identity. Before you achieve something extraordinary, you must first see yourself as the kind of person who does extraordinary things. Identity is the operating system behind every habit, decision, and reaction. If you see yourself as someone who struggles, you will unconsciously create struggle. If you see yourself as someone who finishes what they start, your behavior will eventually align even when motivation fades. Extraordinary impact is not built on willpower, but on self-image. The world does not respond to your goals, it responds to your standards. When your identity shifts, your standards rise naturally. You stop asking how to force yourself to work harder and start asking what kind of person would handle this challenge better. This subtle shift removes internal resistance. Identity-based change feels lighter because it flows from who you believe you are. Many people wait for proof before changing their identity. They say, "Once I succeed, then I will believe in myself." This is backwards. Belief must come first. Not blind confidence, but chosen identity. You decide who you are becoming, and then you behave in ways that reinforce that decision. Small wins become evidence. Evidence builds trust with yourself. Trust becomes confidence. This loop compounds. The danger is that society pushes fixed identities early. You are labeled smart, average, creative, shy, or practical, and over time you obey these labels as if they were laws. Extraordinary people question labels. They treat identity as flexible and designed, not inherited. You are not discovering who you are. You are constructing who you become. This is empowering and terrifying because it removes excuses. When you accept that identity is chosen, you also accept responsibility for growth. Another key idea is that identity must be practiced under pressure. It is easy to feel capable when conditions are perfect. Identity reveals itself when things are uncomfortable. When tired, stressed, or uncertain, your true self-image shows up. This is why training under discomfort matters. You do not rise to your goals, you fall to your identity. Every time you act in alignment with your future self, even when it is inconvenient, you strengthen that identity. Over time, the old version loses authority. You no longer negotiate with habits that do not fit your new standards. You simply outgrow them. Language also plays a role. The words you use internally shape your self-perception. Saying "I am trying" keeps identity weak. Saying "I am becoming" signals commitment. The brain listens to repetition. Speak to yourself like a leader, not a victim. Not with arrogance, but with clarity. Extraordinary impact requires internal alignment. When who you are and what you want point in the same direction, effort becomes focused. This chapter teaches that before changing the world, you must update the story you tell about yourself. Achievement is a lagging indicator of identity. Change the identity, and the results will follow. Chapter 3. Mastering Fear and Uncertainty. Fear is not the enemy of extraordinary action. Avoidance is. Fear appears whenever you step into the unknown because your brain is designed to protect, not to fulfill. Most people interpret fear as danger and retreat. Extraordinary people interpret fear as a signal of expansion. They understand that uncertainty is not a threat, but a requirement for meaningful growth. If you wait until fear disappears, you will wait forever. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward with it. The problem is not fear itself, but the stories we attach to it. We imagine worst-case scenarios without evidence and treat them as facts. The mind fills gaps with drama. Mastering fear begins with separating sensation from interpretation. The racing heart, tight chest, and restless thoughts are just physical responses. They do not predict failure. When you stop personalizing fear, it loses power. Another strategy is exposure through action. Fear shrinks when confronted gradually. Each small step trains your nervous system to tolerate uncertainty. Confidence is built through familiarity, not success. The more often you enter uncomfortable situations, the less threatening they feel. Extraordinary people collect discomfort on purpose. They do hard things not because they enjoy pain, but because they value growth. They understand that comfort is addictive and silently destructive. Uncertainty also sharpens focus. When outcomes are unclear, you must pay attention. This presence improves decision-making. Many breakthroughs happen when plans collapse because adaptability emerges. Fear also reveals what matters. You are rarely afraid of meaningless things. Fear points to areas where growth and purpose live. Instead of avoiding fear, you can use it as a compass. Ask what opportunity hides behind this resistance. Often the answer is growth, influence, or impact. Another crucial idea is that fear never disappears at higher levels. It simply changes form. New goals bring new doubts. The difference is that experienced builders trust themselves to figure things out. They do not need guarantees. They need momentum. Taking action creates information. Information reduces uncertainty. Waiting creates anxiety. This is why motion beats meditation when stuck. You do not think your way out of fear. You act your way out. The chapter emphasizes that fear is a cost of admission. Every meaningful path requires payment. Those who refuse to pay stay small. Those who pay repeatedly gain access to larger arenas. Fear becomes familiar. It stops being a stop sign and becomes background noise. This mastery does not make you fearless. It makes you free. Chapter 4. Focus and leverage. At scale, extraordinary impact is not created by doing more. It is created by doing what matters with precision. Focus is the ability to ignore good opportunities in service of great ones. Most people are busy but ineffective because their attention is fragmented. They respond to noise instead of designing direction. Focus begins with clarity. You must know what outcome truly matters in this season. Without clarity, everything feels urgent. With clarity, distractions become obvious. Leverage multiplies effort. It is the force that allows small actions to produce large results. Time, capital, skills, systems, and technology are all forms of leverage. Extraordinary people design leverage instead of trading hours. They ask, where can this effort compound? Building asset systems or ideas that scale allows impact beyond personal capacity. Focus also protects energy. Attention is finite. Every yes costs something. Saying no is not rejection, it is alignment. When you align actions with priorities, momentum accelerates. Another principle is depth over breadth. Mastery in one area often creates more impact than shallow exposure to many. Depth builds credibility, trust, and influence. Influence creates reach. Reach creates scale. Focus also requires environment design. Willpower is unreliable. Systems win. Arrange your surroundings to support your priorities. Remove friction from important tasks and add friction to distractions. This reduces decision fatigue. Over time, behavior becomes automatic. Leverage also involves delegation and collaboration. Doing everything yourself limits growth. Extraordinary leaders build teams, tools, and processes. They focus on unique strengths and delegate the rest. This is not laziness. It is strategy. Impact grows when you operate where you add the most value. The chapter reinforces that focus is a discipline practiced daily. It is choosing long-term significance over short-term stimulation. When focus and leverage combine, results feel disproportionate. This is not luck, it is design. Chapter 5. Building a life of meaningful impact. Impact is the result of consistent aligned action over time. It is not a viral moment, but a sustained contribution. Many chase recognition instead of service. Recognition fades. Impact remains. To build meaningful impact, you must anchor your work to values, not validation. Values provide direction when motivation fades. Impact also requires patience. The world rewards visibility quickly, but rewards substance slowly. Extraordinary contributors stay committed when progress feels invisible. They understand that roots grow before branches show. Another element is resilience. Impact invites resistance. Change threatens comfort. You must be willing to be misunderstood. This requires emotional strength. Purpose acts as fuel. When your work serves something larger than ego, endurance increases. You become harder to stop because quitting would mean betraying meaning, not just abandoning a goal. Impact also evolves. What matters today may shift as you grow. This is natural. Reflection ensures alignment. Regularly ask whether your actions still serve your values. Adjust without guilt. Growth is not linear. Lastly, impact is shared. You do not create alone. You stand on others and lift others as you rise. Teaching, mentoring, and contributing create legacy. Legacy is impact extended through people. This chapter closes with a reminder. Being extraordinary is not about superiority. It is about responsibility. When you develop your potential, you expand what is possible for others. Impact is the echo of disciplined, purposeful living. When you commit to this path, the world changes, not because you are special, but because you chose to be useful at scale. Chapter 6. The habit architecture of extraordinary people. Habits are the invisible scaffolding that holds extraordinary lives in place, and this chapter teaches you to design habit architecture rather than rely on willpower or rare motivation. The typical approach is random. Try something hard for a day or a week, fail, blame laziness, and start over. The extraordinary person treats habits like engineering problems. Identify friction points, create tiny triggers, measure outputs, and iterate until the system runs without daily moral debate. Begin by shrinking the threshold to start. The minimum viable habit is not an hour of work, but a single readable action so small it feels ridiculous yet unavoidable. If your goal is to write a book, the first habit might be to open a document and write one sentence. The paradox is that the habit that is too small to fail becomes the gateway to identity, because repeatable consistency builds internal credibility. This chapter outlines the 3 layers of habit architecture: anchors, microhabits, and escalation protocols. Anchors are reliable existing routines. you attach new behaviors to: a morning coffee, a commute, or a lunch break. By piggybacking a new micro-habit on a stable anchor, you avoid the friction of inventing new timing. Micro-habits are the smallest reproducible units, the one-minute moves that you can perform even on exhausted days. Escalation protocols define how small wins compound into larger commitments. After 7 consecutive micro-habit completions, you add another minute or a small additional task, and after 30 days, you formalize a new threshold that inches you toward mastery. The architecture requires measurement and non-judgmental feedback. Keep a simple tracker, a calendar tick, a one-line journal, or a habit app. The purpose is not perfection, it is evidence. Evidence trains belief. When you accumulate small ticks, you no longer persuade yourself with future promises. You rely on yesterday's evidence. The chapter gives practical templates for habit stacking specific to ambitious projects: creative work, physical resilience, and leadership influence. For creative output, pair a 5-minute morning free write with immediate publishing of a tiny asset like a paragraph on a private feed. Repetition reduces perfectionism and builds a portfolio. For physical resilience, link a 2-minute mobility routine to your shower anchor. Over weeks, mobility becomes non-negotiable because the ritual is painless and the benefit is felt. For leadership influence, adopt a daily micro-practice of a 1-sentence public acknowledgement to someone on your team. This not only builds gratitude, but also trains you to notice contributions and distribute credit. Another core idea is friction engineering. Identify expansion points where a single decision interrupts the flow and automate or eliminate them. If you waste minutes deciding what to wear or what to eat, standardize choices so cognitive energy flows to creative or strategic tasks. Use meal prep, capsule wardrobes, or predefined meeting agendas to remove decision tax. Friction engineering extends to environment edits. Create a focused corner for deep work with one monitor, minimal notifications, and physical cues that signal the brain to enter concentrated mode. The chapter also deals with relapse protocols and kind restart strategies. Every habit system will encounter disruptions: travel, illness, or personal crises. The difference between the extraordinary and the average is the restart ritual. Immediately perform one reduced micro-habit the moment you can, record the interruption honestly, and adjust the anchor or micro-habit if necessary. This removes moralizing and preserves momentum. Lastly, social embedding amplifies habit persistence. Public commitments, small accountability partners, and visible streaks increase consistency because humans are wired for reciprocal expectations. The author shares a case of a study group that committed to 30 minutes of practice daily and used a group chat to post a single line of evidence. The social friction of letting peers down kept the group far more consistent than solo pledges. Habits are not the enemy of spontaneity. Well-designed habits create the internal free space for creative spontaneity without the chaos of willpower battles. When you structure your life with micro-actions that scale through simple escalation rules, extraordinary results compound quietly until the life you once imagined becomes ordinary because you built it deliberately. Chapter 7: Systems for Learning Faster and Smarter. Extraordinary people are relentless learners, but they learn with structure. They do not binge absorb information and hope something sticks. This chapter gives a systems-level playbook for accelerated learning that converts curiosity into competence and competence into visible impact. The core insight is that speed and depth are not opposites if you design the right loop. Consume focused input, extract precise practice tasks, get fast feedback, and iterate. Start with intake design. Curate high-signal sources rather than subscribing to noise. Identify 3 trusted teachers, 2 primary books, and 1 practical course for each domain you care about. Replace broad browsing with targeted sampling. Read 1 chapter, extract 3 concrete techniques, and apply them immediately in a 15-minute experiment. The chapter introduces the notion of micro-practice, short, focused repetitions of a component skill rather than vague, hour-long study sessions. For example, if you are learning public speaking, practice a single rhetorical device like the one-line pivot until you can deploy it reliably in conversation. Micro-practice isolates the smallest reproducible unit of competence and accelerates muscle memory. Another essential is deliberate scheduling. Block focused practice periods that mirror the timing of real-world performance. If you will deliver talks in 90-minute formats, occasionally rehearse for 90 minutes under realistic conditions with distractions turned on to simulate pressure. This builds both skill and tolerance for the conditions in which skill is used. Feedback loops are the engine that separates amateurs from pros. Build immediate feedback into every practice. Record your riffs, solicit one-sentence critiques from mentors, or measure objective metrics such as speed, error rate, or conversion. The chapter emphasizes fast experiments, small probes that test ideas quickly and cheaply, rather than massive initiatives that take months to yield data. Treat each experiment as product development. Hypothesis, minimum viable test, measure, and pivot. Knowledge becomes leverage when you convert it into repeatable modules that others can execute. Teach-back methods are another multiplier. After you learn something, explain it in plain language to a peer or teach it through a microcourse. Teaching forces clarity, exposes gaps, and creates assets, recorded micro-lessons that can be reused and monetized. The chapter also explores meta-learning, learn how to learn. Map your learning curve by tracking the time invested versus output achieved and optimize your practice mix accordingly. If a technique yields diminishing returns, rotate to a different input or add a coaching layer. The social component matters. Join fast feedback cohorts, mastermind groups, or practice pods where mutual critique is normalized and aligned to growth. Peer pressure, when positive, accelerates application and turns learning into visible work rather than private consumption. Finally, longevity in learning demands curiosity rituals and rest. Alternate intense learning sprints with scheduled downtime so the brain consolidates insights. Many breakthroughs occur during incubation. Plan for low input periods where ideas are allowed to recombine. The author closes with a 90-day learning sprint template. Pick one meaningful skill, design weekly micro-practice tasks, secure one coach or peer for feedback, run 3 experiments to test application, and ship 2 small projects that reveal real capability. Systems for learning make mastery inevitable when paired with relentless consistency. Chapter 8. Mastering Influence, Persuasion, Negotiation, and Moral Authority. Impact at scale requires the ability to influence, and influence is ethical power exercised with humility and clarity, not manipulation. This chapter dissects modern influence into practical skills: narrative framing, calibrated ask, negotiation mechanics, and the quiet currency of moral authority. Start with story as structure. Humans decide through narrative frames. Data without story is often ignored. Learn to craft a one-sentence framing that orients listeners. What is the problem? Why it matters now? And the simplest next step. Use micro-stories, short, vivid examples that make abstract proposals concrete, because people update beliefs when they see plausible outcomes. Next is the art of the calibrated ask. Never present a binary demand. Offer 2 to 3 choices that preserve autonomy while steering toward your preferred outcome. For instance, instead of asking, "May I have your approval?" Propose option 1 with timeline A and option 2 with timeline B. Framing choice reduces resistance. Negotiation is reframed as joint problem-solving rather than adversarial bargaining. Prepare by mapping interests, not positions. Understand what the other party really values and design options that expand pie size rather than carve slices. Use objective criteria where possible, benchmarks, precedents, or market rates, to depersonalize conflict and build fairness. The chapter explores moral authority, the long game of influence. Moral authority is earned through consistent behavior, visible competence, and the willingness to take principled stands, even when unpopular. It is not moralizing, it is credibility grounded in action. People follow those whose choices align with stated values and who pay visible costs for integrity. Build moral authority by small, public acts that align with your stated mission and by transparent accountability when you err. The chapter also addresses influence at scale through networks and platforms. Systematize influence by creating repeatable content formats, regular rituals that gather people, newsletters, live sessions, and simple offers that convert attention into action. Use scarcity and social proof ethically, limited seats to create commitment, testimonials to provide social validation, but avoid deceptive pressure tactics which erode long-term trust. Digital persuasion requires stewardship over attention. Design messages that respect recipients' time, concise frames, clear asks, and next step clarity. Finally, power dynamics matter. When you are in authority, structure conversations to invite dissent and reduce groupthink. When you are not, use influence by aligning with higher value partners and by building subject matter credibility through small deliverables. Influence is a practice of generous clarity. Shape choices so others win materially and morally. When you master these mechanics, you move from isolated achievement to multiplying impact through others. Chapter 9. Design systems for scaling. Scaling impact is not accidental. It is engineered through repeatable systems that translate small successes into broad change. This chapter gives a blueprint to convert local wins into scalable programs by standardizing processes, codifying knowledge, and building layered distribution. Begin with the minimum viable model. Capture the essence of what works in one sentence and ensure it can be taught. If a community program doubles graduation rates in a pilot, isolate the non-negotiable elements, the cadence, the mentor script, the measurement routine, and test whether these elements replicate in a different context with minimal adaptation. Standardization reduces variance and enables replication. Next, codify tacit knowledge into simple operating manuals, checklists, role scripts, and decision trees that let new teams deliver predictable outcomes. Use modular training that focuses on mastery of one capability before adding complexity. Technology becomes a force multiplier here. Use simple platforms for onboarding, measurement, and feedback loops so you scale, not by adding managers, but by improving systems. Distribution strategy is critical. Diverse channels reduce correlation risk. Partner networks, digital platforms, licensing to local operators, and direct delivery each have trade-offs in control and reach. Pilot each channel with clear KPIs and scale the ones that show consistent conversion. Measurement is the governance of scale. Build a compact dashboard that tracks leading indicators rather than only lagging output. Early signals, engagement, retention, and replication fidelity predict long-term impact more reliably than one-off success stories. Invest heavily in low-cost measurement during pilots to avoid false positives. Governance and funding design matter for sustainability. Align incentives for operators through revenue share models or performance-based grants rather than pure charity that creates dependency. Layer reserves for quality assurance and emergency adaptation. Finally, scale with humility. What works in one culture or context may fail elsewhere unless adapted respectfully. Use local partners to translate not only language, but values and constraints. Iterate rapidly with small batches and treat scaling as a sequence of experiments, not a single launch. When systems are thoughtfully designed and disciplined execution follows, a small idea becomes a durable movement rather than a fleeting success. Chapter 10. The Relentless Rhythm of Long-Term Influence. Impact at scale is a marathon, not a sprint, and the final chapter covers the rhythms, rituals, and governance necessary to sustain influence over decades. The extraordinary rarely burn out because they built renewal into their calendars, feedback into their governance, and legacy into their structures. First, adopt a seasonal approach to work. Alternate intense creation seasons with restoration seasons where learning and reflection dominate. This cyclical pattern preserves creativity and prevents the slow leak of fatigue. Second, institutionalize feedback through routine reflection. Weekly rapid reviews for tactical issues, quarterly strategic retrospectives, and annual deep audits that question core assumptions. These rituals convert experience into improved systems rather than repeated mistakes. Third, train successors and create durable institutions. Influence survives people when knowledge, decision rights, and incentives migrate out of a single brain and into stable teams. Fourth, protect moral capital. Your reputation and ethical standing are leverage for future impact. Guard them by aligning words and deeds, by rapid repair when mistakes occur, and by avoiding short-term wins that undermine long-term trust. Fifth, steward resources intelligently. Blend earned income, philanthropic funding, and partnerships to reduce single-channel vulnerability. Finally, remember the personal dimension. Your life is the instrument of impact. Invest in relationships, health, and curiosity so you can contribute effectively for decades. The chapter closes with a small exercise. Design a 10-year impact map with seasonal milestones, a succession candidate named, and a simple funding model that supports quality over scale. When you adopt relentless but humane rhythms, you do not merely chase influence, you sustain it, refine it, and pass it on. Chapter 11. Resourcefulness. Turning scarcity into strategy. Resourcefulness is the muscle that stretches ordinary inputs into extraordinary outputs, and this chapter teaches you to treat limits as design constraints rather than defeat. Most people interpret scarcity as a permanent handicap. Not enough money, not enough time, not enough network. Resourceful people see scarcity as a framing problem. What can I create with what I already have? And they become architects of clever solutions. The chapter opens with a vivid story of a small nonprofit that had no budget to scale but a surplus of goodwill and a network of local volunteers. Instead of chasing large grants, they designed a barter system. Local businesses provided meeting spaces in exchange for community recognition and volunteer labor, improved storefronts in return for promotional partnerships. The result was a rapid expansion of service capacity without a single large donor. That story demonstrates the first principle: map untapped assets. Inventory not just cash, but attention, relationships, useful skills, physical space, credibility, and time. Each of these can be converted into value with a creative bridge. The chapter gives a practical mapping exercise. List 5 non-cash assets you and your immediate network control, and imagine one exchange that turns each into immediate operational leverage. Test the smallest viable exchange and scale what works. Next, the book covers adaptive financing. Resourceful builders prefer staged funding mechanisms, small pilots funded by micro-sponsorships or revenue share pilots over long, inflexible grants that create dependency. When capital is scarce, choose structures that embed validation. Pre-sell a pilot, partner for cost sharing, or use convertible notes to attract early believers without giving away governance prematurely. This approach reduces risk for funders and aligns incentives with measurable progress. The chapter also examines time as a limited but manipulable resource. Effective people design focused windows, deep sprint-like blocks, and outsource or automate low-value tasks to free high-leverage hours. The technique of time slicing is practical. Schedule 2 90-minute deep sessions daily and protect them ruthlessly. Redistribute lesser tasks to cheaper labor or simple automation. The narrative provides a hands-on template for outsourcing. Identify the task that consumes the most cognitive drag for you. Create a minimal SOP that someone else can follow in 30 minutes, and test a single hire or contractor for a week. Often the psychological barrier to delegation is perfectionism. The chapter reframes delegation as a learning vector where imperfect help today paves the way for much more impact tomorrow. Another critical topic is the creative use of constraints to spark innovation. When Google limited its initial ad inventory, it forced highly targeted formats and better matching algorithms. Constraints created product focus. The chapter gives exercises. Set a 30-day constraint on budget, personnel, or time and force yourself to deliver a measurable outcome. Then compare the result to an unconstrained project. You will often find the constrained project is clearer, faster, and more defensible. Resourceful people also cultivate optionality, small, low-cost options that can be exercised when conditions favor them. Examples include flexible vendor contracts, testable product lines, or modular partnerships that can expand without renegotiation. Optionality reduces regret and increases willingness to experiment because downside is limited. The chapter discusses resilience trade-offs. Sometimes buying convenience is rational, but understand the ongoing cost and choose convenience consciously rather than by default. Social resourcefulness is another pillar. Build reciprocal relationships before you need them by offering small, consistent value, introductions, useful content, or honest feedback. Over time, these deposits turn into reliable channels when you require urgent access to talent, distribution, or advice. The chapter gives a weekly practice. Commit to one small, no-expectation help gesture each week to someone in your network and log the relationship movement after 3 months. You will see an exponential effect as goodwill compounds. Finally, resourcefulness demands a mindset shift from scarcity to problem solving. When you habitually ask how to do more with less, you accumulate pattern recognition across domains. The chapter ends with a compact test. Identify a current constraint in your most important project. List 3 creative conversions of non-cash assets into operational value. Execute the cheapest one in 7 days, and journal the outcome. Doing this repeatedly trains not just strategy, but courage, because the first time you solve a problem without new capital, you expand your sense of what is possible. Resourcefulness is not heroic improvisation. It is disciplined design that turns limits into strategic advantages and allows the impossible to feel like a deliberate experiment rather than an impossible demand. Chapter 12. Cultural Fluency. How to translate ideas across boundaries. Impact at scale requires more than a great idea. It requires cultural fluency, the ability to translate concepts, practices, and institutions into local idioms so they actually work in different communities. This chapter reframes expansion as translation rather than replication. A program that succeeds in one city often fails in another, not because the core idea is flawed, but because social norms, incentives, and historical context differ. Cultural fluency begins with humility. Assume you are not the expert in the local context and design listening into every phase of scaling. The chapter opens with a case where an educational model failed abroad until local teachers were brought into design sessions. Their small adaptations, different storytelling styles, revised scheduling, and altered reward systems doubled engagement. The first practical step is ethnographic mapping. Spend real time with the people you intend to serve, record their routine constraints, language metaphors, and decision triggers, and then design a pilot that honors those rhythms rather than imposing an external calendar. The chapter gives a tactical template for ethnographic listening: 3 interviews, 2 shadowing sessions, and 1 community forum where you ask one open question: what would make this work for you? And then act on the input within 7 days. Transparency fosters trust. Even small visible changes based on feedback signal respect and accelerate adoption. Next, the book explores adaptation rules: what must remain consistent and what can change. Identify core principles that are the active ingredients of your model and protect them, while allowing surface features, terminology, delivery format, and symbolic rituals to flex. For instance, a health behavior program might keep the hygiene lesson core while switching from classroom lectures to family cooking sessions in cultures where family meals are central. The chapter gives a decision grid to classify features as core, adaptable, or optional, helping implementers navigate trade-offs without diluting efficacy. Another essential topic is building local champions. Outsiders rarely sustain change alone. The tipping point is always local leadership that embodies both credibility and capacity. Invest in identifying and empowering micro-champions, people who can translate the idea into idiomatic action, recruit peers, and solve emergent friction. Training champions is not a one-off. Create peer cohorts, mentorship loops, and small performance incentives that keep momentum alive. Measurement must be culturally meaningful. Standard KPIs can mislead if they ignore local values. Work with local stakeholders to choose indicators that reflect both impact and local priorities. This might mean replacing a raw attendance metric with a community-nominated engagement score or a qualitative narrative of change. Reporting should be simple, transparent, and timely, so local teams can act on signals quickly. The chapter also addresses ethical pitfalls, avoiding cultural imperialism and predatory scaling where programs extract value without meaningful reciprocity. Build reciprocity into your model: revenue share, local capacity building, or co-ownership structures that give communities a stake in long-term benefits. The book offers negotiation templates for co-ownership and partnership that protect both mission and dignity. Finally, cultural fluency includes linguistic nuance. Simple translations of language often miss idiom, metaphor, and emotional tone. Chapter 13: Courageous Leadership, Decision, Accountability, and Moral Courage. Courageous leadership is the crucible where strategy meets character. This chapter explores how leaders make hard choices, hold themselves and others accountable, and sustain moral courage when pressure demands compromise. Leadership under pressure is not theatrical bravado, but disciplined clarity, deciding in ambiguity, communicating transparently, and accepting the personal cost of principled action. The opening vignette profiles a founder who faced a devastating operational failure and chose to suspend a major program to fix quality rather than spin public optimism. The short-term reputation cost was steep, but the long-term trust dividend was immeasurable. The first principle is decision clarity. Define the non-negotiables that guide choices, so decisions are not ad hoc. A simple decision framework, mission alignment, evidence threshold, and risk mitigation reduces paralysis and justifies moves under scrutiny. The chapter provides a decision script. State the mission link, cite the evidence you have, name the unknowns, propose a measured response, and set a review date. This script communicates competence and creates an accountable cadence. Accountability itself is an ethical practice. Leaders who create accountability systems, clear metrics, transparent reporting, and consistent consequences build cultures where problems surface early rather than hidden until catastrophic. Accountability is not punitive when paired with learning. It is a scaffolding for improvement. The book provides a practical accountability ritual, weekly published dashboards, a short remediation plan for missed targets, and a transparent public note that outlines corrective actions and timelines. This ritual reduces rumor and builds shared responsibility. Moral courage is the most costly form of leadership because it often requires short-term loss for long-term integrity. Examples include refusing lucrative funding that would compromise mission, speaking truth to powerful stakeholders, or protecting team members at personal expense. Moral courage compounds trust and reputation. People follow leaders who sacrifice for values because it signals reliability when stakes matter. The chapter discusses how to cultivate moral courage through small-scale practice. Take a visible stand on a minor ethical issue, honor commitments even when inconvenient, and create a habit of public repair when mistakes occur. These micro-actions build a moral muscle that prepares leaders for bigger tests. Another critical segment examines decision under dissent. Courageous leaders invite dissent but retain decisiveness. Build structured dissent channels, devil's advocate sessions, red team reviews, and anonymous feedback mechanisms that surface counter-arguments early and improve choices. After listening, decide decisively and explain the rationale. People respect clarity even when they disagree. Finally, leadership is a relational craft. Courage without empathy becomes brutality. Accountability without support becomes fear. Pair hard choices with compassionate communication. Explain the why, acknowledge the cost, and outline support measures. This combination preserves morale and focus. The chapter closes with the leadership development agenda. Practice the decision script weekly for 3 months. Implement one transparent accountability ritual. Take one visible moral stand within your scope, and run a dissent session before any major decision. Courageous leadership is not the absence of fear. It is the discipline to act rightly under pressure, to own outcomes, and to steward moral capital so your impact can scale with integrity. Chapter 14. Systems over willpower, designing success that runs without you. Extraordinary impact does not come from heroic bursts of motivation. It comes from systems that quietly execute, even when motivation is tired, distracted, or gone. This chapter reframes success as an engineering problem rather than a personality trait. Willpower is volatile and expensive. Systems are calm, repeatable, and scalable. The chapter opens with a familiar trap. People who start strong, push hard, then burn out. They confuse intensity with progress. Systems thinkers do the opposite. They design environments that make the right action the default. Instead of relying on discipline to wake up early, they redesign evenings to guarantee rest. Instead of forcing focus, they remove distractions. The core idea is simple. Behavior follows design. If your environment is sloppy, your results will be sloppy. If your environment is intentional, progress becomes automatic. The chapter introduces the concept of friction management. Add friction to bad habits and remove friction from good ones. Put your phone in another room to add friction to scrolling. Prepare your work tools the night before to remove friction from starting. These micro adjustments compound faster than motivational speeches. The narrative then explores habit stacking as a system amplifier. Attach a new behavior to an existing routine so it inherits momentum. Writing after morning coffee. Reviewing goals after brushing teeth. Systems piggyback on what already exists. The chapter emphasizes measurement over emotion. Track inputs, not just outcomes. You cannot control results directly, but you can control the system that produces them. If your goal is impact at scale, track daily actions that move the needle rather than obsessing over distant metrics. Another powerful idea is identity-based systems. Instead of asking what you want to achieve, ask who you are becoming. Systems reinforce identity. A person who sees themselves as a builder behaves differently from someone chasing motivation. Each system is a vote for the identity you want to embody. The chapter shares a practical framework for building one core system per domain: health, work, relationships, and learning. Keep each system simple enough to survive bad days. If it only works when conditions are perfect, it is not a system, it is a wish. The chapter also tackles scaling. Systems allow delegation. When your process is clear, others can execute without constant supervision. This is how impact multiplies beyond individual effort. Leaders who refuse to systematize become bottlenecks. Leaders who design systems become platforms. The chapter ends with a blunt truth. If your success depends on how you feel, it will always be fragile. Design beats discipline. Systems beat willpower. When your life runs on systems, consistency becomes boring, and that boredom is the sound of progress compounding quietly in the background. Chapter 15. Strategic Sacrifice. Choosing what to abandon to win bigger. Most people ask how to do more. Extraordinary people ask what to stop. This chapter confronts a hard reality. You cannot scale impact without sacrifice. Time, energy, attention, and reputation are finite. Every yes is a hidden no. Strategic sacrifice is the discipline of cutting good options to protect great ones. The chapter opens with a painful example of a founder who diluted their mission by chasing every opportunity. Growth stalled not because of lack of effort, but because of lack of focus. Progress requires subtraction. The chapter introduces the concept of opportunity cost awareness. Every project consumes invisible resources: cognitive load, emotional bandwidth, and recovery time. When these are scattered, execution weakens. Strategic sacrifice begins with ruthless prioritization. Identify the few activities that create disproportionate impact and protect them aggressively. Everything else becomes negotiable. The chapter presents a simple audit. List your current commitments and rank them by long-term impact. Then eliminate or delegate the bottom third without guilt. This is not laziness, it is leadership. The narrative explores the fear behind sacrifice: fear of missing out, fear of disappointing others, fear of losing relevance. These fears keep people busy but ineffective. Extraordinary leaders tolerate short-term discomfort to secure long-term leverage. They understand that saying no is a form of respect for the mission. The chapter also discusses seasonal sacrifice. Not all sacrifices are permanent. Some are strategic pauses. There are seasons to build, seasons to rest, and seasons to scale. Knowing which season you are in prevents burnout and confusion. The chapter highlights how high performers intentionally underperform in less critical areas to dominate where it matters. Balance is a myth at scale. Alignment is the real goal. Another key idea is reputation sacrifice. Sometimes you must look foolish, slow, or unpopular to build something meaningful. Early stages rarely look impressive. People who need constant validation rarely build lasting impact. Strategic sacrifice also applies to identity. Let go of outdated self-images that no longer serve your next level. The chapter offers a practical exercise. Write down 3 roles, habits, or commitments you must release to move forward. Then choose one to cut within 7 days. Momentum follows clarity. The chapter closes with a sobering insight. Success is not built by accumulation alone. It is built by courageous elimination. When you choose what to abandon with intention, you reclaim energy, sharpen focus, and create space for impact that actually matters. Chapter 16. Long-term vision. Playing games. You can win over decades. Extraordinary impact is the result of long-term thinking in a short-term world. This chapter challenges the addiction to immediacy and reframes success as a decades-long game. Most people optimize for quick wins, fast feedback, and visible validation. Visionary builders optimize for durability. They ask a different question. What decisions today will still make sense 10 years from now? The chapter opens by contrasting finite and infinite games. Finite games are about winning now. Infinite games are about staying in the game. Impact at scale requires infinite thinking. You design systems, values, and relationships that compound over time rather than spike and collapse. The chapter introduces the concept of delayed rewards literacy. The ability to tolerate slow progress without quitting is a competitive advantage. Long-term thinkers build emotional resilience by detaching identity from short-term outcomes. They focus on trajectory, not momentary position. The narrative explores vision as a practical tool, not a motivational poster. A real vision guides trade-offs, hiring, partnerships, and strategy. If your vision does not change daily decisions, it is decoration. The chapter provides a vision calibration exercise. Write a 1-paragraph description of the world you are trying to influence in 20 years. Then evaluate your current actions against it. Misalignment becomes obvious quickly. Another key theme is compounding. Small, consistent actions outperform dramatic but inconsistent efforts. Relationships compound. Skills compound. Reputation compounds. The chapter uses vivid examples of creators and leaders who focused on mastery and trust, rather than virality and hype. While others chased attention, they built credibility. When attention finally arrived, they were ready. The chapter also addresses patience without passivity. Long-term thinking does not mean waiting. It means acting decisively while accepting that results lag behind effort. Visionary leaders build feedback loops to stay adaptive without abandoning direction. They review strategy regularly without rewriting the mission every month. Finally, the chapter confronts mortality. Awareness of limited time sharpens long-term thinking. When you think in decades, petty conflicts lose power. Ego-driven decisions fade. What remains is contribution. The chapter ends with a grounding question. If this project succeeds beyond you, what will remain? Structures, values, people, and ideas are the true markers of impact. Long-term vision is not about predicting the future. It is about building something worthy of surviving it. Chapter 17. Networks that multiply your impact. Networks are the engine that turn isolated effort into exponential change, and this chapter teaches you how to build, maintain, and mobilize relationships that reliably multiply your influence rather than waste your time. A network is not a collection of names. It is a set of active, reciprocal channels where value flows in predictable directions. The first lesson is intentionality. Decide what kinds of connections you need before you start collecting business cards. Diverse networks are powerful because they combine different kinds of influence, operational competence, distribution reach, funding capacity, and moral authority, and the best builders consciously create bridges between these nodes. Start by mapping your current network on a single page. List 10 people you can ask for help with distribution, 10 people who can provide funding, 10 who can solve technical problems, and 10 who can provide moral accountability. Most people have overlaps and blind spots. The map makes scarcity visible and actionable. Next, move from passive contacts to active collaborators by establishing micro-exchanges, small, no-pressure offers of value that create a habit of reciprocity. Give first not as a marketing ploy, but as a discipline. Offer a useful introduction, surface a resource, or share a candid insight that saves someone time. Over time, these micro-actions turn dormant contacts into reliable channels because people remember the moments when someone offered value without immediate demand. The chapter emphasizes the architecture of network roles. High-impact builders cultivate connectors, people who introduce you to clusters you cannot reach on your own. Amplifiers, people with platforms who can make an idea contagious. Operators, trusted executors who can run parts of the plan. And stewards, those who hold you accountable to mission and ethics. Deliberately recruit for each role and design simple ways to engage them that respect their time while creating clear upside. A practical ritual is the 60-day reciprocity check. Every 60 days, identify 3 people from different network roles and send them a one-line update plus one small helpful item tailored to their needs. This tiny habit keeps the network warm and surfaces new opportunities without constant outreach. Another critical idea is network layering. Local, regional, and global ties serve different purposes. Local partners are essential for on-the-ground execution and cultural translation. Regional relationships help scale across similar contexts. Global ties provide rare resources, perspective, and legitimacy. Build each layer with different strategies, deep trust and equity at the local level, formal partnerships at the regional level, and credibility-building moves like shared research or co-authored public pieces at the global level. The chapter also addresses network resilience. Over-reliance on single connectors or funders creates fragility. Diversify the sources of introductions and funding, document contact handoffs, and formalize small agreements that preserve relationships through personnel changes. Teach your team to manage relationships with simple CRMSs and one-page briefs that summarize what each partner cares about, preferred communication style, and the last meaningful interaction. This prevents painful repeats and shows respect. Influence multiplies when networks are intentional and when you convert weak ties into stronger instruments through consistent value exchange. The chapter warns about extractive networking, the temptation to treat relationships as pipelines for short-term gain. That approach burns out rapidly. Instead, cultivate what the author calls network stewardship, a modest allocation of time and resources committed to maintaining relationships for years, rather than approaching every conversation as a transaction. Stewardship signals predictability and reliability, which in turn attracts higher quality partners. Finally, mobilize networks with clarity. When you need help, ask a specific bounded favor and explain the win for the partner. People are far more likely to act when the ask is clear, the time commitment limited, and the potential upside mutual. Launch micro-campaigns, a 3-week partner pilot with clear KPIs, a shared content bundle that elevates all participants, or a matched funding offer that leverages others' resources. By designing intentional networks, converting them into habitual reciprocity, diversifying across layers, and mobilizing with clear asks, you transform relationships into durable multipliers that let your work scale beyond what you could do alone. Chapter 18. Funding Scale. Designing financial models that grow with integrity. Scaling impact inevitably bumps against capital constraints, and this chapter demystifies funding by reframing money as a design variable you can shape through models that preserve integrity while enabling growth. The mistake most organizations make is hunting for one large grant or investor and treating funding as a binary problem. High-performing builders view capital as a portfolio to be engineered with multiple instruments: earned revenue, philanthropic capital, debt, impact investments, and creative capital flows like barter or in-kind partnerships, each chosen for its cost, flexibility, and alignment. Start with a clear funding thesis. What kinds of capital match your stage, risk profile, and mission? Early pilots benefit from flexible, patient capital that tolerates failure. Scaling requires instruments that reward performance, like revenue share agreements or program-related investments. And mature, durable models can incorporate modest debt or catalytic grants that unlock larger pools. The chapter provides a taxonomy and decision matrix to select instruments practically. List potential sources, estimate expected cost of capital, dilution, interest, reporting burden, and match against operational needs, working capital, capacity building, or expansion. A core principle is hybridization. Blend earned income with mission-aligned subsidies to reduce dependency and increase resilience. When feasible, design products or services with a sliding scale or cross-subsidization so the value delivered funds operations while preserving access for low-income beneficiaries. Earned revenue creates measurement discipline because you must satisfy paying customers, and that discipline improves product-market fit and makes future fundraising easier. Another practical arm is staged validation. Before chasing large institutional capital, run small revenue pilots and publish transparent unit economics. Funders want evidence. A clear path from small pilots to repeatable models reduces perceived risk and increases leverage in negotiations. The chapter also explores impact investment mechanisms, blended finance, social bonds, and outcomes-based contracts, showing how to structure relationships where payments are tied to verified results. These models align incentives but require robust measurement and credible governance. Plan for the reporting and verification cost as part of your operational budget. Creative funding tactics receive attention. Partnerships that swap services for distribution. Co-development deals where local partners share launch costs, and matching challenges that convert small donors into leverage. The author stresses ethical clarity. Funding that undermines mission or creates perverse incentives should be refused even if tempting in the short term. Keep a funding ethics checklist. Will this capital change who you serve, the quality of your offering, or your decision rights? If yes, design mitigation or decline. Chapter 19. Measure what matters. Learning systems for real-world impact. Measurement is not a bureaucratic burden. It is the lifeblood of purposeful adaptation. And this chapter teaches how to build learning systems that turn data into better decisions without drowning in dashboards. The first trap is vanity metrics, numbers that feel impressive but tell you little about actual change. Replace vanity with leading indicators that predict long-term outcomes. Engagement quality instead of raw views. Retention and behavior change instead of initial uptake. And fidelity to core practices instead of superficial completion. Start by defining the minimal set of metrics that map directly to your theory of change. 2 or 3 leading indicators and 1 outcome metric.
Keep measurement lean and useful. The chapter provides a simple measurement cycle. Define hypotheses, collect focused data, analyze quickly, and iterate experiments. Treat each pilot as a learning lab, where the primary goal is to test assumptions cheaply and fast. Use mixed methods, quantitative signals for scale, and qualitative stories for depth, because numbers explain the what and narratives explain the why. Build low-friction data collection into operations, automated logs, short in-person ethnographic probes, and one-question daily prompts for frontline staff. Data is only valuable when it flows to the people who can act on it. So, create a rapid feedback loop. Weekly micro-reviews that highlight one anomaly and one experiment to address it. Avoid the paralysis of waiting for perfect evidence. Act on plausible signals and measure the effect. Another critical feature is disconfirming evidence. Actively seek data that could disprove your assumptions rather than only confirming what you hope. This reduces bias and prevents costly scaling mistakes. Design experiments with control groups or staggered rollouts when feasible, so you can attribute outcomes to your intervention rather than external trends. The chapter also tackles the politics of measurement. Data can threaten powerful stakeholders when it reveals inconvenient truths. Frame measurement as a shared tool for improvement, not judgment, and anonymize sensitive reporting where necessary to protect relationships while preserving learning. Measurement must be paired with curiosity rituals, structured reflection sessions where teams interpret data together and design small probes. These rituals build collective ownership of learning and accelerate adaptation. Finally, publish your learning. Share both wins and failures publicly in short, candid briefs that invite collaboration and reduce duplication across the field. Transparency attracts partners, improves credibility, and accelerates the ecosystem's collective ability to do better. When you measure what matters, build fast learning loops, and publish honestly, your work becomes not only more effective, but also more trustworthy, an essential ingredient for lasting impact at scale. Chapter 20: Stewardship, Succession, and the Art of Leaving Well. The final chapter shifts from growth to longevity by focusing on stewardship, the ethics and engineering of leaving a durable institution behind. Impact is truly scaled when it survives the founder's exit and continues to serve the mission with competence and integrity. Stewardship begins with clarity about purpose. Write a short stewardship covenant that articulates the mission, non-negotiables, and the values that must persist. This covenant guides decisions during transitions and reduces ambiguity for successors. Next, plan succession as an operational program, not a sentimental gesture. Identify potential leaders early, expose them to varied responsibilities, and create phased handover timelines with measurable milestones. Succession training includes technical competence and cultural immersion. Successors must understand both how things are done and why they matter. Financial stewardship matters too. Ensure the organization has reserves, diversified funding,
and a simple endowment or liquidity plan to handle early post-transition shocks. Legal mechanisms, clear governance documents, delegated authorities, and contingency clauses prevent messy struggles and preserve mission during contested periods. The chapter also addresses the psychological side. Founders often conflate identity with product, making exit painful. Practice detachment by creating rituals of celebration for milestones instead of clinging to titles. Build roles where founders can continue to contribute as stewards, advisors, or patrons without operational control, preserving institutional memory while empowering new leadership. Another critical piece is embedding accountability for the future. Independent boards, external audits, and public reporting requirements create durable incentives for quality. Institutions that survive are those that institutionalize curiosity and learning, make regular strategic audits, and refresh governance periodically to prevent ossification. Lastly, design legacy intentionally. Legacy is not a monument. It is the continued capacity of people and systems to deliver value. Invest in training, documentation, and small endowments that fund core learning and quality assurance for decades. The chapter closes with a stewardship checklist, a one-paragraph covenant, a 3-year succession roadmap with named candidates, a 3-month reserve fund target, and a public transparency schedule. Living well is not surrender. It is a final act of service that multiplies the good you started. When you steward institutions carefully, your influence becomes durable, your values survive, and the impact you hope to create continues to grow long after you step aside. Conclusion: from impossible to inevitable. Do the impossible is not a single act of heroism. It is the accumulation of disciplined decisions, designed systems, and relentless humility. The chapters above map the architecture: identity, fear mastery, focus, networks, funding, measurement, and stewardship that converts ambition into practical, lasting impact. The final truth is simple and demanding. Extraordinary work is available to anyone willing to treat their life as a deliberate project, to build small, reliable systems, and to mobilize others with integrity. Start small, measure honestly, and scale with care. Do this consistently, and the impossible becomes not a myth, but an outcome of design.